Hello, this is Jennifer. I'm so glad you're here. It's been a while since I've had a pre-recorded video, but after going live for the entire day on Black Friday, I just needed to catch up on some other things. But now I'm back and I have some cards for you. Now, this was me kind of getting back into normal crafting and just having some fun. So I have two interactive cards for you and a set of stenciled cards. So this is just having some fun, playing with some fun products, trying out some new things, and stretching our supplies. And I hope you enjoy it. Now I do have those really cool interactive cards. We'll do those later in the video. First, I'll do a fun stenciling technique and show you how I go about creating a bunch of stamp sentiments at once. So let's get started. I will be using some new products from Kristina Werner first. This is the Cheerful Flowers collection. There is a die set, a large stamp, and a large layering stencil set. You can buy these together or separately. The die set has Thinking of You with the shadow die and two flowers that layer together for an inlaid look. The 6x6 stamp lines up nicely with the stencil, so again, you can use these all together and separately in many different ways. I will only be using these layering stencils today. What I like about Kristina's layering stencils is they're really big. In fact, these allow you to create two A2 panels at once, or you could do slimline or 5x7. Now these stencils are very easy to line up thanks to little etching, and then they have the outline stencil. So there's many ways you can use them, and you'll see as we go. So I'm starting with the first stencil, and I just placed it in the corner of a piece of white cardstock. I'm working on my Glassboard Studio glass magnetic mat, so those magnets are holding my stencil and paper in place. I have my Concord in 9th ink. This is the watermelon color, which is currently one of my favorite colors, and I'm using the Pink Fresh 1-inch blending brushes. The reason I chose these brushes is it's a really easy way to apply controlled amount of ink. So you could start with a light amount and then build up to a heavier amount. So after doing that ink, I thought I'd put a bit of darker color in the center, so I'm using my smaller Altenew mini blending brushes and applying cranberry, and that just gives the look of dimension. Then I'll add stencil 2 on top, and over this I'll put sweet pea and wild berry. Now I'm lining the stencil up with the corner of my cardstock each time so it lines up nicely, but keep in mind Kristina's stencils have etching, so you can easily line up the stencil with what you've already inked. It makes it super easy to line up. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're not planning to line up in the corner of your cardstock each time. Now over the third stencil, I put avocado ink, and then I will come in with a darker artichoke ink kind of at the base of the leaves. I am not taking great care to do wonderful blending, and really it's kind of uneven. That's okay. These inks will absorb and soften and give beautiful results. Very forgiving ink. All right, next up I have my fourth stencil here, and I'm going out of order, but it really doesn't matter. I put spiced cider and sunflower over the little dots in the center of the flowers. Now this next stencil actually does the background, which I think is really cool and something unique that Kristina does. Over this, I'm putting Lisa Horton metallic ink. This is a silver metallic pigment ink. It comes in a set with gold, silver, and copper. And I just applied that ink over the opening, so now my background will be a beautiful shiny silver. By the way, that ink you can apply with brushes or a foam inking tool. So here we can remove that stencil, and look how gorgeous this is. Now keep in mind there is another stencil in the set that gives like the reverse of everything we just did. So this you could lay down and then maybe spray a spritz over this, or put like a clear embossing paste, or you can use that other stencil alone or on your matching envelope. Now, while that dries, let's work on our sentiments. And I'm going to make a bunch of sentiments at once because I fell in love with the Kristina Werner checking in stamp set and coordinating dies. I love the style of this, the classic style, and the sentiments are wonderful. So this will definitely be on my favorites list. Now I wanted to stamp these all at once. I could have taken off all the stamps and put them on the door of my Misty, but instead I'm just taking the whole stamp set and taping it into the door of my Misty. That way I can stamp all the sentiments very quickly, and I don't have to worry about taking each stamp off, putting it on, and putting them away. This is an easy way to do a bunch of stamped images at once. Into my MISTI stamping tool, I'm placing a piece of white cardstock, and I'll stamp the sentiments with Altenew Obsidian black ink. You could do any color ink you want here. I am using my Hero Arts scrubber. I got an extra one of these that I don't use to clean my stamps, and I use that to apply pressure over the stamping tool, and this works really well. So after I've stamped that on one piece of white cardstock, I'll move on to another, and you can do as many as you want. You could do several in black, then maybe switch to using Versamark and do some gold heat embossing. You can do whatever you'd like. I decided to do all black today. Next, I'm taking a piece of thin paper. This could be printer or copy paper. I have graph paper here. Placing that inside of my MISTI and stamping all the excess ink onto it. It doesn't need to be stamped beautifully. Now I'll take the coordinating dies and line it up with these stamped images on this thin sheet of paper. I will line up the coordinating dies and put tape around them, and I'm being pretty generous with the tape because I want them to stay in place. Now some of these images are too close together to put the dies to get on there because they will kind of overlap each other. So you'll see I'm skipping a few of the sentiments, but I'll come back to those later. So I'm putting lots of tape on these. I want these to stay put, and then I'll run it through my die cut machine. This will die cut out all of the words, and you're left with a piece of paper and the dies taped onto it. Now I can take this and just lay it over the nice stamped images that we did on white cardstock. And you can see how it lines up beautifully with each of those sentiments. Run that through our die cut machine. I can pop out those sentiments and move on to my next stamped piece. This is a really fast way to stamp a bunch of sentiments at once. I also will keep these dies on that paper with the tape so that I can use this again. And if I ever want one of the dies separately, I can just take that one off and then put it back into the opening. This is an excellent way to save time cutting out lots of sentiments or any stamped images. Now I still need to cut out those other sentiments that are on my cardstock there. So I will stamp all of those sentiments again on another piece of thin printer or graph paper, and I will tape the leftover dies onto those images. Now I decided not to cut out all of the small images. I really just wanted the big ones. So I lined those up, trimmed all the excess from it, and now I can place that thin paper with the dies attached right onto my stamped panels and cut out the rest of the sentiments. The reason I chose using thin paper is it will cut through better if the dies are attached to a thin paper instead of a thick paper before you put it on top of your nice thick stamped cardstock. So now I have all of these sentiments and I can choose two to use for today's card. Now, I could have used the Thinking of You sentiment that comes in the coordinating die set, but I really like the look of these stamp sentiments, so I'm going with that. Next up, I'm cutting down my inked panels here to be 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I really like that I was able to get 2 out of the one background. Okay, now to put our card together, I wanted to put a little frame around the outside edge. You could see that foil frame. For this, I am using a new die set from Kristina Werner called the A2 Thin Frame die set. That's over there on the right. Then there's also the A7, which is on the left, and I like that there are both options. Now these will give you nice frames around your card and then a smaller frame that can fit nicely at the center of your card, and then you can also see the sentiments. The reason there's that extra metal around the outside edge is sometimes if you have a thin, large rectangle die and you run it through your die cut machine, the pressure kind of makes the sides of the die warp and not give like a straight line. So by adding that extra metal, she's ensuring that we get a perfect rectangle frame every time, and I really appreciate that. So again, those are two different die sets, the A2 and the A7. Now I'm using the A2, the larger die from the A2 set, and I'm cutting that from Concord and 9th Champagne cardstock, which is one of my favorites. This will create a large thin frame and a solid rectangle from the center. And that large thin frame is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches on the outside edge. So what I'll do to get that thin frame lined up on the front of my inked panel is I'll take the solid rectangle that I die cut from the middle, place that right at the center of my inked background and use a magnet to hold it in place. I'll run liquid adhesive around the edge of my inked panel, and then I can place the thin rectangle around the big rectangle in the center. And the reason I'm doing this is sometimes it's hard to glue something thin down in a really straight way. It kind of wants to go wonky. And by putting that solid rectangle in the middle, I can push that thin frame up against it and I can be sure that it'll glue down straight. So I'm gluing that directly onto the outside edge of my inked panel. I'll take that rectangle out of the center, and now we have that nice thin frame. And I did the same thing on both panels. Now again, these are 4¼ by 5½ inches. I was going to glue them directly onto a note card of the same size, but I decided I wanted a white trim. So I have an A6 white note card here. I have a bunch of those pre-cut, and I will glue the panel on that and trim the excess off the bottom. So in the end, that white note card is 4½ inches wide and 5¾ inches tall. I created 2 of those note cards, added our panels onto it, and then added our stamped sentiments. Now behind those stamped die cut sentiments, I did add extra die cuts for some stack dimension. And I also added some glittery gems to the center of my flowers just to kind of bring out even more shine. Now you noticed here, as I noticed here when I was creating this video, that I glued this card upside down. So I will have to go back and fix it. But I am in love with that shine on the background. I'll link here to another video where I did a similar technique, but I did a gold background. I just think it's a stunning way to step up your stencils and make your cards extra special. Now, I did want to show you how I fix that upside down card. What I do is I cut off the back half of the card and I'll save that piece of cardstock for another project. Then I just take that entire piece and glue it onto the front of a note card of the same size. So I glue things together upside down all the time, so I've gotten pretty good at fixing that by just cutting the back off and adding it to a new card base. Okay, now it's time to do 2 really fun interactive cards. And I just am excited about this because it's a product from Concord and Ninth that makes it easy to create a dynamite card. And they have different add-ons available for it, and you know how I'm a fan for that. And I know there'll be more coming out. And you could also use products you have. Now let's look at the completed card first. Now this one has a belly band on it. I tried to keep the front of the note card itself very simple. I just did some stenciling and a stamped sentiment. You slide the belly band off, and when you open up the card, you have this incredible explosion of flowers. You can see the word thanks in the flower bouquet. You have a banner sentiment going across it, and it folds up nicely. I just think this is a really fun way to make a special card, and I will show you after this card, on the next one, I'll show you how you can modify their dies that Concord and Ninth has to create even like really simple versions of this and some other ideas. So I will be doing more with this die set in the future. I'm just really excited about it. It's brilliant how it comes together, and you'll see that in a moment. Now, before we do that interactive element, let's do some stenciling on the inside and front of our note card. I'm using the Kristina Werner Gradual Dot Stencil set. I like that these stencils, again, are large, so you can do 2 card panels or a bigger card. And you have the dots going in both directions, so you have the 2 options. All right, now let's ink up the inside of our note card first. So I have a 4¼ by 5½ inch white note card, and I have it opened up. I'm putting it on my sticky mat so it'll hold the cardstock and the stencil in place. I've lined that stencil up over my note card, and I have a piece of masking material here that I'm lining up right along the score line at the center to mask off the right side of the inside of our card. On the left side, I will add a soft amount of Concord and Ninth lilac ink, and I'm putting it heavier towards the center and fading out. I'm actually not putting the ink over the entire stencil. I'll remove the stencil and rotate it so that I can have the same dot sizes on the right side. So I'll line that up, then I'll take the masking material, line up the masking material with that fold line in the center, and this will mask off the left side on the inside of our card. And now we can add ink to the right. So this will give us kind of a mirrored look. I like that there are many ways that you can use these stencils. And I'm going very light and simple with this because this is going to have a beautiful bouquet that pops up, so I don't want this to be too distracting. Now, to tie the outside of the card in with the inside of our card, I'll do some stenciling on the front of the card too. So I'll close the card, place it onto the sticky mat. I'm using my T-ruler to find the halfway point, which is 2 3/4 inches, and I'm putting a piece of tape at that 2 3/4 inch mark just so I can see it visually. Sorry, my head gets in the way. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. That way I know the horizontal center there, so I can do the same kind of stenciling trick on the outside of my card as I did on the inside. So I'm lining up the center of that stencil with those pieces of tape, and I will again mask off the top half of the card and apply ink to the bottom half. And I'll do that light amount where I start heavier towards that edge and go softer towards the bottom of the card, so it kind of fades out. Again, this is just something I wanted subtle. I want the front of the card to be very simple, or I guess very clean, I would say, because then the fun surprise in the inside is even more impactful. Now, you could decorate the front of this to be more involved if you wanted to, totally up to you. So now I'm placing the stencil on the top part of the card and repeating the inking process. Sorry, my head gets in the way. It's the easiest way to make sure things are lined up. All right, so we have our note card ready, but before I assemble the pop-up feature on the inside, I want to do a practice run. Whenever I get a new interactive die set, I do a practice run with scrap cardstock so that I can try out the mechanism, and then I save that practice run card in with the die set so I can refer back to it in the future when I use it again. So this is the new Concord 9th Pop-Up Burst Base die set, and this is one of those dies that creates really cool interactive feature, and it can be used in many ways, which I'll demonstrate in the next card. I first am going to do that practice run of assembling this as it's meant to be used. So I have a white note card that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I'll open it up. Now this piece that I have here that comes in the die set doesn't actually die cut. It just helps you to get things lined up, and this is really helpful. So it actually tells you on the back of this piece of metal how to do it, but it's easy to do. Those little feet of this guy that looks like a bodybuilder lines up with the bottom of the inside of your note card. And then that slit there in the body of our bodybuilder, you line up with the fold line on your note card. Then in his hands here, you do a little pencil line. On his head, you do a little pencil line. And then in his other hand, you do a pencil line. Those will help you to know where to glue things down. All right, so it looks a little silly, but it is super helpful in the end. Very easy to do. By the way, I'm just going through this to show you how to put this mechanism together. We'll make the card in a moment. Now on this next piece, which is the actual pop-up mechanism, there's this large area that looks like a coffee filter. And then there's that arm that sticks out. Now the coffee filter area, you'll fold back along each of the score lines. The die makes the score lines for you. So you're folding back along each of the score lines and reinforce it with your bone folder. So this is your little folded coffee filter piece. Now the arm sticking out, you'll do the opposite. You will fold it along each score line towards you. So I will fold along each of the score lines that that die makes on the arm, folding each time towards me. This will make it much easier to assemble if you do the folding the right way. So on the large coffee filter portion of this mechanism, you're folding away from you. On the arm, you're folding towards you. So this is the piece that you have in the end, and you'll be amazed how this comes together to create a really cool pop-up. We can now glue this to the inside of our note card, and I'll start by focusing on the large coffee filter area. Just pretend that arm isn't there, it's just kind of hanging off to the side. Now on these little flaps on the back of the coffee filter area, we will put liquid adhesive. So you got the long flap on one side, the medium flap on the right, and that tiny little triangle flap. So you'll want to put a strong adhesive here. I chose to use liquid adhesive because that way I can wiggle it till I get it in the right position. And just so you could see better, I put a pencil line along the score line or the fold line of our card. It's just going to help you see me line it up better. So I put liquid adhesive on these flaps. There's also that tiny little triangle. Don't forget about him. And then we will place this down into our card. And you want to make sure the fold line down the center of our large coffee filter lines up with the fold line on our note card. And the bottom of our coffee filter, that little triangle down there, lines up with the little V that we made with our pencil earlier. So it lines up nicely. So this will give you the perfect position to have this right at the center of your card. So helpful. Now these pencil lines you don't have to do. I'm doing it so you could better see all of the different ways that this lines up. All right, now on this large coffee filter area, the die actually made an impression of this little shape. And that shape there I am coloring in with a pencil. You can see it on the die itself. It's just like a scored area. It's to show you where to do your next gluing. So I colored it in with pencil so you could see. And now the flap on our arm over here, we'll put liquid adhesive, and then we'll line up those two areas. It's kind of hard to see in the video, but in real life you can see the etched line on the large coffee filter area, and it makes it easier. Now when you pull this over, you got to finagle it a little bit to line those up, but you can see from the side to make sure you get it right. And then I just like to hold it there while it dries. Now this is going to end up giving us 2 tiers to our pop-up feature, which is really fun because it allows you to create a really cool inside pop-up scene. Now I will show you how to simplify this later in the video if you're interested in that. It'll give you more ways to use these dies. Once that glue is dry, I'll just open and close it a few times just so I can see that fun mechanism. All right, so now it is time to add a banner. Now you don't have to do this next step. You could just do the pop-up mechanism here. But the die set also includes a pop-up banner. And this is really cool because you could use it alone also. So I'm folding right down the center of the banner, and then I'm folding the opposite way on the 2 flaps on the end. So you end up with what looks like a bird flying. The die also creates those 2 little ends to the banner that you see there. The die creates a pressed in line. That's a rectangle that I'm filling in with a pencil so you can see it better. It also creates a rectangle of faux stitching. Just ignore that faux stitching for now. We're looking at the impressed or the pressed in line of the rectangle. And you can see I traced it in with a pencil here. I'm putting glue inside of that area, and then I will glue it to the back of this right banner side here. And I just line up the corners of the banner with those pencil lines or those pressed lines that the die makes. So there we have our fun banner. Now, this you could just glue to the inside of a card alone. You don't have to add that pop-up feature. It's like 2 separate elements that could be used together separately. So I could take this, glue it inside of a card, and you would just have a simple pop-up sentiment. So there are lots of different things that you can do with this die set. But let's show how to put them together and how to really make this banner pop out from the inside of your card. Now to do that pop-up, there is a die that creates these pieces, and I'm folding along each of the score lines in the same direction. So when you fold it up, you get what looks like a cattywampus or a wonky rectangle. I'll put liquid adhesive on one of the end flaps and put the other end flap onto it, and there you can see our wonky rectangle. The die creates 2 of these, and you need to fold 2 of them in the same way. And this is like where a die set like this is really cool, because this was created, these little pop-ups here were created just the right angle to make that banner pop up beautifully. Now remember how I said those end pieces on that red banner had faux stitching? Those are going to help us to line up these little pop-up mechanisms. So I'm tracing in the faux stitching on the back of our banner. And I will put liquid adhesive into that faux stitching rectangle. You can use a double-sided tape here, but you want to use something strong for all of these interactive pieces. So let's put liquid adhesive in there, and I'll press the side of one of our wonky rectangles into that wonky faux stitched rectangle area. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. Now remember earlier I used that bodybuilder man to trace in his hands? Well, those hand pencil marks there are where we will place these wonky rectangles. So I'll put liquid adhesive on this platform of the wonky rectangles. I'll put that right into that pencil line, so it just lines up right into that pencil line perfectly. So I like to do the right side first, and then I will put liquid adhesive on the left side and line that wonky rectangle into the little pencil mark nook that we created. It's kind of hard to explain all these things, but when you're putting it together in real life, you can see from the side, it's really easy to do. I like to use magnets to hold my pieces in place while they dry. While that dries, the die set also has a die that creates this piece that you see here, and you need to cut 2 of them. You fold along the score lines, put liquid adhesive along the long end of one of the die cuts, and lay the long end of the other die cut onto it. This will create a belly band that you can use to wrap around your card. Now, you don't have to use a belly band with your card, and you don't have to use the belly band on this card. You could use this belly band on other cards also, so it's really handy to have. All right, so let's let that dry and go back to our pop-up card feature and make sure that everything is working fine. And this is what it's like, that pop-up mechanism, when you use all of the elements included in the die set. However, we can break it down to simplify it later in this video and to get a different look, and I will be showing more in future videos because it's really fun and can be used with a lot of the products you already have. It's a base pop-up, so you can use lots of different products with it. All right, now it's time to do this process on the inside of my stenciled card. Now, the reason I showed you the card I just showed you was that was my practice run. I'm going to keep that note card, you can see it up there on the top right, with that die set, so I can refer to this when I make any in the future. It's sometimes helpful to have that practice card there when you create it again in the future. Also, I'm using all white pieces to create this card today, and I knew it'd be really hard to see all the lines and the gluing and stuff with the white. So I thought I'd go ahead and show you with the colored cardstock scraps up there on the top right. I also feel like seeing the process twice can be helpful. You know, like when you're taking a class in college, you usually like repeat the math problem a few times in different ways so that you kind of get it, understand it better, I guess. And that's what I like to do in my videos. So I'm folding backwards along all of the large coffee filter area, and then I fold towards me on the arm sticking out. I'm putting liquid adhesive on the flaps of the coffee filter area, and I will lay that down into my card so that that bottom point lines up with the pencil point that I created, and the center fold line of that coffee filter will line up with the center fold line of my note card. So it really is easy to line it all up thanks to how Concord and Ninth designed this. So after giving that some time to dry, we can test it out and see how that opens and closes nicely. And next we need to add our arm. So remember, the die creates that little engraved or pressed in area over on the left of the coffee filter, and we just attach the little flap on the arm over to it. I like to just hold that there while it dries because it's kind of a little wonky how it lines up. You can see it, but you got to hold it there while it dries. Once I'm sure that is dry, we'll test things out. I always like to stop and test things out before I go to this next step because I want to make sure that this will open and close easily and that I don't mess something up along the way. For the flowers on the inside, I'm using the Concord and Ninth Burst of Blooms bundle. This is like an add-on set that works really well with the base pop-up that I just showed you. You can see there are lots of great floral elements, but also elements that work great specifically for this pop-up. And there's a stamp set available. Now I'm going to start with the thanks. See that thanks that's kind of sticking out on the little sticks from the center of our bouquet? I'm going to show you how I line those up, and they really made it easy to do. That die set has a die that creates these two little white arches with faux stitch lines on them. You put liquid adhesive on each of those faux stitch lines and line up the letters for thanks. So those thanks letters are included in that same die set, and I cut them from Concord and Ninth champagne cardstock. And if you put glue along each of the faux stitch lines on these little white little white curved rectangles, and put the ends of the thanks letters onto those faux stitch lines, you will end up getting a great pop-up there in the center. So I did the first one. This has the T, H, and A. And the top curve of that curved rectangle piece lines up with the top curve on our bottom pop-up. It fits there perfectly. And the cool thing is Concord and Ninth included those little curved rectangle dies to make it easy to line these up in there. You don't have to try to eyeball it. So on the other curved line, I will put liquid adhesive along each of the three faux stitch lines. Then I will place the remaining letters into that glue. Then this curved rectangle gets glued to the top right of our bottom pop-up feature, so right next to the other element that we added, and it's sized just perfectly. So you could use these with other things around it, maybe a bunch of stars or flowers or balloons. You could add lots of things around that thanks. Now I'm going to be using the flowers in the die set to really fill out that bouquet that pops up. Now, the next card will show you it doesn't have to be a bouquet that pops up. You can have lots of other things, but I really wanted to focus on these beautiful flowers. After I've assembled a bunch of flowers, it's time to start adding them to our pop-up. I like to start with the smaller pop-up area there on the bottom, and I glue flowers and leaves to the front of it. Now, the bottom of this pop-up will get covered up later, so it doesn't matter that you can see the bottom of these stems. But when you glue this down, I tried my best to avoid that center fold line. I don't really want anything to interfere with that because it might interfere with opening and closing our card. So you will be able to see throughout this that most of the time I glue around that center fold line. And I'm just putting glue wherever I want. Liquid adhesive is best because it'll dry nice and strong, and you can wiggle your pieces into place. So again, the bottom there where all the stems are will get covered up. So there I have added some flowers to the front of my bottom pop-up mechanism, and I do again like to open and close it and make sure it's all working well. Now let's move on to the bigger pop-up mechanism, that bigger coffee filter shape in the back. On the front of that, I will add some of the greenery and then I will add flowers. Again, I try not to glue anything over the fold line because it might interfere with the pop-up. I like to glue some of the flowers all the way to the edge on the left and the right, but never overlapping with where things will fold because it will mess up that pop-up. It may not mess it up, but it makes it harder to really work well. So now I will keep adding flowers to that bigger pop-up area. You could definitely simplify this by using less flowers. You could simplify this by doing only part of the pop-up, which I'll show you on the next example, but I find this really fun to do. I can't wait to die cut a bunch of balloons and have those pop up. A bunch of stars would be fun. You could even do some fun elements for the holidays. So after I've glued a bunch of pieces onto that middle mechanism, but I'm not gluing over the fold line. Here, this one hangs over the fold line, but it doesn't glue to it. I can now add some elements to the card itself. So these will get glued tucked into that kind of funnel that our pop-up makes. This will get glued right into the card. So I again will avoid overlapping the fold line of the card just so that it doesn't make it harder to open and close. And just add a bunch of flowers and elements kind of sticking out. There really is no right or wrong way to do this. You could follow my example on where to arrange things, or Concord and Ninth always has a lot of great examples on their website too. So you can find one that you can just kind of mimic and glue in the same way. Once the bouquet is done, I will use one of the dies in that Bloom's die set that creates this fun little curved piece that you glue onto your bottom pop-up to cover up all those stems. So I cut this from champagne cardstock and I'll glue it right on top. And now we have this really fun bouquet with the word thanks popping up along with the flowers. Now let's create our belly band. I cut this long rectangle die with the curved end that's included in the base die set. Cut it twice from green and I glued the two long flaps together so I have my belly band. On the flat side of the belly band, I'm just arranging a bunch of leaves and flowers from the same die set, just so this kind of matches with the inside. I kept my flowers on the belly band so that the overall design on the front is pretty clean and simple so that the fun surprise is on the inside. And really, I'm just using some of the leftover flowers and leaves that I had from what I created on the inside of the card. Now, while that belly band dries, I'm going to be brave here and close my card and try to stamp on the front of it. Now, there's a lot of dimension on the inside, right? So I should have done this before I added everything to the inside, but I didn't think of it. So I'm just carefully stamping it. I don't get a perfect image, but I just went in with a black pen to fill in any areas where the stamp missed. So there you can see the fun mechanism, and we have our belly band that will slide right over that sentiment on the front and hide it. Now let's go back to the inside of our card now that everything's dry and create the banner to go with it. You could skip this if you wanted to, but I stamped "You're the Best" onto the banner itself and I folded along the fold lines. Now I'm gluing the little ends of the banner on both sides, using those little impress lines that the die makes as a guide on where to line things up. It really makes it foolproof. Next, we need our two wonky right rectangles that pop up. So I cut those from white cardstock and I'll fold them along each fold line, put liquid adhesive on one flap, attach it to the other flap so we have our pop-up wonky rectangle, and I'll do that with both pieces so we have the two rectangles. I'll flip my banner over, and remember those faux stitched markings on the die cut? We'll line up our little pop-up rectangles into that faux stitching and put something heavy on it while it dries. Once I'm sure that's dry, I put liquid adhesive on the pop-up platforms on both ends and line those up with the pencil marks that we created earlier using that metal bodybuilder. So it just lines up with those little pencil marks, making it just the right placement for everything to work really well. Now, you don't need to follow those pencil marks if you just do the banner alone, but if you're doing the banner with the pop-up mechanism, it's good to follow those marks. So let's look at our completed card. We have the belly band on here. This does have some dimension on the inside, so I would mail this in a padded envelope, or you could hand deliver or put on that extra postage. So I slip off the belly band. There you can see the message on the outside, kept that very simple, and when you open it up, look at that fun. You have that bouquet that pops up, the banner sentiment that pops up, and it really makes a nice impression. Now you'll notice I changed my banner. I had it white cardstock before. I tore it out and changed it to purple cardstock because I like that better. But in the end, I used the add-on floral blooms set along with the base to create this. But you could use your own blooms by all means. You could use your own flower die cuts, balloons, whatever you have. So that base die set is really universal. All right, now here is my next card. This one's very simple, actually, and it didn't take long to do. When you take the belly band off, you have the fun pop-up hooray. And this time I only used the bottom portion of the pop-up to simplify it. So you can alter these to get a few different options out of it. And I'm going to show you those options before I show you how I made this card. And I will be doing more of these in the future. So remember this funny looking die from the base set? Now I'm going to cut it in half. So I am cutting along the coffee filter only. So that I have the coffee filter shape and the flaps, and I'm removing that arm. I'll go ahead and fold along each of those score lines, folding back along each of them. And this will give me a single large pop-up mechanism. Before I add that to the inside of a card, let's cut another of this die cut and cut off the arm. So I'm cutting the arm off and just cutting off a bit of extra here to mimic the flap on the left-hand side. So I have a flap on the right-hand side that kind of mimics the flap on the left-hand side. I'll actually show you an easier way to do this in a few moments. Now I can fold along each of these score lines and I'll end up with a smaller pop-up mechanism. So you could use them together, attached together like I did on the last card, or you could use them separately, which would give you a simpler design and give you a lot of different options. So I'll put liquid adhesive on the folded back flaps on these and put them to the inside of a card, just gluing them so that that center fold line on the pop-up lines up with the fold line on our card. I just have a 5x7 card here, just showing you how they work. I probably wouldn't glue these two both into the same card, but I just wanted to show you how you could have separate elements that pop up, one big and one small, made with that pop-up die base. So again, this is just glued into a 5x7. I'm not going to add anything to it. You could add whatever you wanted. I just wanted to show you that you could create these individual elements. So there you can see the different pop-up options. And I'll be using the bottom one for our next card. So let's start out by stenciling in the inside of our card. I'm using the Concord and 9th Bursting Backgrounds Turnabout stencils. There are two stencils in here. One does like a floral print, one does like a celebration print. I will use the celebration one on this card. Now the floral one I used to create the background that you see here. I'm just going to show it to you really quickly. I think it's really fun and that both are included and they give different looks. Now these are turnabout stencils, just like the turnabout stamps that we all know and love. So what I'll do is I'll line up the stencil right at the center of the inside of our note card. So I have the note card open on my sticky mat and I'm lining up the stencil right at the center, just kind of eyeballing it. And I'm placing this all in the corner of my sticky mat so that I know where to line up my stencil each time. I have the stencil lined up with the top and the left-hand side of the sticky mat. Now over this, I will apply a Sprout ink. I wanted this to be a softer ink and I'll use bold colors for my pop-up mechanism. So I started out with a bigger brush, but decided I wanted to apply this a little bit darker because this is a really light ink color. And I moved on to a smaller brush. So after I applied the green over the stencil, I will remove the stencil, clean it. I just spritz it with rubbing alcohol and wipe it clean. Then I'll bring the stencil back to position, but I'll rotate it one turn. This is, as I said, a turnabout stencil. If you've used a turnabout stamp from Concord and Ninth, you know it's a large stamp and you turn your paper 4 times to get a fun background. Well, in this case, you take the stencil and turn it 4 times to get a colorful background. So in the second position, I did the Harbor ink. I'll clean my stencil, line it back up, and then rotate it another turn, and then ink it up with another color. This time I will use Aqua Sky. Now, I am only using 4 colors. I change the color each time I rotate. However, you could do multiple colors over each stencil position and end up with a really colorful background. Here I've turned it one more time to the 4th position, and I'm applying that silver metallic ink. This is the Lisa Horton metallic silver. It comes in a set with silver, gold, and copper. I'm using the silver, but any pigment ink would work here, and this will just give us some shine. So this is the 4th and final position, and there we have this fun burst that will be on the inside of our card. And remember, in that stencil set, there is also the floral burst option. Now let's do that pop-up element. Before I do the actual pop-up itself, let's create those hooray letters. Now this is the Concord and Ninth Burst of Cheer. This is another add-on possibility that allows those letters for hooray and some stars to pop up. And then there's the coordinating stamp set. And you can see the die set actually has a banner die cut there that you could do for an alternative sentiment banner. I will pop up the hooray word, but I wanted to mention that stars are included. So there's these extended star dies that you could cut from acetate and then glue stars at the end of and have them stick out of the back pop-up portion. But I'm not doing the back pop-up portion today, so I won't be using those, but wanted you to know that those are in the die set. I'm cutting those extended letter dies from different colors of cardstock. And then you can see over there the word hooray. That word hooray die, just the regular letters, I'll cut from an iridescent kind of holographic cardstock. This is just a specialty cardstock I had in my stash that really creates a lot of shine, and it looks like it's dimensional and textured, but it's super smooth. I'll link to some similar options below in my YouTube description. So on my extended lettered colored die cuts, I will glue my holographic letter die cuts at the top. So you have that colored extension with your shiny letters at the top. This is really easy, and I really like how they design this. So this will pop up beautifully, and I don't have to take much effort to do so. This is actually the most time-consuming part of this pop-up mechanism, and it really didn't take long. Now let's create the small pop-up. So I'm just using the arm alone. So what I'll do is fold it in half, fold the arm in half along the fold line, and then cut around that on the coffee filter side of the die cut. I showed you a different way to do this before, but this is actually the easiest. So I'm just cutting along that. Then when I open it up, I have this pop-up mechanism that has the score lines that I fold along. So I'll just fold along those score lines, folding back on each of them. And this will give me a small pop-up. So I don't have to worry about that back tier. I could have, but I wanted to make it simpler and save a bit of time and just show you that you can get a lot out of these interactive sets. Now, the first thing I'll do before gluing it inside of my card is add the hooray letters. So I've glued the first one, so the end of that green extender piece lines up with the bottom of our pop-up mechanism, and it's glued close up to the edge of that fold line there. Then I'll do the O close to the fold line at the center, lining the bottom of that teal colored extender piece with the bottom of our pop-up. Then I can glue the O, the other O, right between it. So I find it good to glue down the H, the second O, and then add the first O between it. And I'll do the same thing on the other side with the R-A-Y. By the way, while I'm doing this, another thing you could do is cover up those letters or cover up the stars on these extender dies and put like a heart on it. So you can have hearts that pop up or other letters that pop up. So sky's kind of the limit with these, and I can't wait to see what other add-ons they come out with. Once that's dry, we can flip it over, and on the flaps that are on the back, I'll put liquid adhesive. You want to put something strong here. You can use double-sided tape again, but I wouldn't use a tape runner. So I use liquid adhesive, and I will place this down kind of towards the bottom inside of the card, making sure that the fold line at the center of our pop-up mechanism lines up with the fold line on the inside of our card. Then I can put something heavy on it while it dries, and then we'll test it out and check out this fun Hooray pop-up. It took less time than the last card because I only did one tier of the pop-up. You could instead use the bigger tier if you wanted to. You could use either. But it just shows you another way to use your dies so you can get more from them. Now for our belly band, I cut the long rectangle die twice from blue cardstock. I'll glue those flaps together. On one of those flaps, I did white heat emboss You Did It onto the front using the coordinating stamp set. This card is going to my son who is in exams right now, and I plan to give this to him when he comes home from exams. So I wanted to keep it kind of simple. All right, so after closing this up, I did add a few stars to the belly band, but other than that, there's nothing else on the front of the card. The front of the card is plain white. I could have stamped a sentiment at the center of the card that the belly band would cover, but I decided not to do it and just keep it simple. All right, so let's look at that completed card. You can see the simple design from the front. Doesn't look like much, right? But as soon as you slide that belly band off, it comes off very easily. You have that fun Hooray on the inside. Now, I did use the star dies and some smaller star dies that I had on hand to cut from my scraps, and I glued that along the background just for some more added interest, and then 3 stars to those pop-up Hooray die cuts. So this one, it didn't take that long at all and shows you how you can change up your base die to get different options. So I was really excited to share this great pop-up die set from Concord and Ninth because I think there are so many ways that you can use it and you can incorporate dies you already have. Great way to get more out of your products. Now I do plan to do more videos with this set, so stay tuned for those. In the meantime, if you're interested in anything that I used in this video, I have it linked below in my YouTube description. I will also link to a couple other related videos at the end here. I hope you enjoyed watching. I had a great time creating these cards, and I will see you again soon in a future video.